I don't think anyone would argue that the Pokemon are the real stars of the Pokemon games. I certainly didn't give a shit about any of the human characters as a kid, which is why I loved the idea of Pokemon Mystery Dungeons so much. But when the idea of a playable Pokemon trainer in Smash Bros. First came up, I'm sure we were all curious. And I can't be the only one thinking we would actually control the trainer themselves. We didn't get that, but what we got was still cool. The Pokemon trainer hangs out in the background of the stage commanding one of 3 Pokemon that they can switch between on the fly, changing the gameplay and strats seamlessly. At least, seamlessly in Ultimate, which was a huge upgrade from Brawl. Like the Mii fighters, I'm lumping all 3 Pokemon together since you have to use all 3, and you're forced to switch each time you die. And like the Miis, I have my preferences among the pocket monsters. My least favorite would be Ivysaur. He's a decent enough balance of strength and speed, and I love the way he uses his flower bud to shoot out seeds, pollen, and even explosions, but their attacks overall never really wowed me like the others. My second favorite is Squirtle. Small, quick, cute, and still capable of dealing decent damage and stringing together combos, even if he has the same weak flood that Mario has, and getting KOs is a little trickier with him. And my favorite out of them all is, appropriately enough, the only one who got to have his own separate outing as a playable character, Charizard. Big and powerful, and while I do miss his Rock Smash and Mega Evolution, he still has Flare Blitz, which is fun to use despite the risk of recoil. The thing that makes Pokemon trainers so interesting is that you're kind of forced to switch between 3 to really make the most out of them, switching up your playstyle constantly. There is a better version of this playstyle that I like more for a bit of consistency, but as someone who enjoys Pokemon a fair amount, this is still a champion level fighter in my eyes. We're finally near the end of the double digits, but I barely even talked about the reveal trailers. Kinda wild, actually. There's a lot of really good ones, but someone tell me I'm not the only one that thinks Sephiroth has the best trailer. It's so well made, I get hyped up watching it even today. But a snazzy reveal isn't the only thing Sephiroth has got going for him. Remember earlier when I talked about how it sucked Final Fantasy got so little representation in Ultimate despite Cloud being in the base roster? Well, thanks to putting in this edgy little bad guy, we got another stage and more music and spirits added. Somehow that excited me more than the actual new fighter, but Sephiroth is still fun as a character. Despite all the other big bads in Smash, Sephiroth has that feel of being a boss character more somehow, even more than Ridley, weirdly enough. Slow but still beefy attacks, devastating specials, and his wing power-up. There's also some bizarre aspects to his character, like how he's actually a lightweight, or his final smash inflicting random status effects, and the fact that the wing comes out at specific points in the fight based on your damage and your enemies or their stock or some weird, some crazy math stuff like that. Like with many characters hyped all to hell in their announcements, Sephiroth became less interesting in time. I mean, Giga Flare is still stupidly strong, but there's no way to hit anyone with a functioning brain that could just dodge out of the way. And even with his sword's stupidly long reach, he doesn't always feel like he takes over that much of the battlefield when fighting against a competent opponent. And also the fact that there's a fairly slow wind up and wind down from his smash attacks, so it honestly feels like you're vulnerable more often than you should be. Although, that does still feel kind of appropriate for a boss fight in a traditional sense. Even still, he exudes so much power and control, and actually landing his slow but devastating attacks feels so satisfying. I never cared for feeling like an edgelord, but this feels like the most accurate playstyle of an edgelord, and it actually feels pretty good. Now, if only I could make time to play the Final Fantasy VII Remake. So, Fox was unwieldy, and Falco was a noticeable improvement despite not even breaking my top 20. Is there no pleasing me with these Star Fox reps? Well, he may not have broken into the top 10, but 13 out of 82 is still pretty damn impressive, so Wolf O'Donnell, take a bow. It was rather bold of the Brawl developers to make another Fox clone, even if they both were semi-clones, but somehow they once again made a clone I much prefer over the original. Wolf has the lowest mobility out of all the Star Fox characters. Even his blaster is slower, which, why do you holster it after each shot? That seems like such a huge waste of time. But what he lacks in speed, he makes up for in raw animalistic power. Rather than a good combo game, Wolf prefers tough, hard-hitting claw swipes and kicks, and the results are satisfying, at least to me. Weirdly enough, his up special actually charges much faster than the other two. There are still some shortcomings with even Wolf's approach to this playstyle, and even worse, I can't even begin to make use of his side special in its weird angle. But with Wolf, who I actually feel some control over and can actually feel how strong his attacks are, those shortcomings feel pretty insignificant overall. As nice as a more unique Star Fox rep would have been, Crystal, having Wolf back in Ultimate is good enough for me. Especially with that outfit. I don't know why, but I love Wolf's style in Ultimate. It caught me off guard at first. It didn't really feel right for what I knew of his character, but it grew on me pretty fast. He looks cool. I have kind of a random question to ask for anyone who's been following me since my early webcomic days, or even anyone that's actually seen a lot of my art even from back a few years ago. Would it surprise you to know that the earliest basis of my art style was actually inspired by Sonic the Hedgehog? I didn't really think about it until recently, but I was a huge Sonic fan as a kid, and I drew a lot of Sonic characters. And looking at my character's style, it kinda makes sense to me. So basically, in a sense, Lyle is kind of a glorified Sonic OC. Actually, now that I think about it, my VTuber model is kind of a glorified Sonic OC. What the fuck? So it should come as no surprise how stoked I was to see Sonic actually get added to Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and how disappointed I was at EGM for their April Fool's prank saying Sonic and Tails were in Melee. I'm still only barely recovered from that. So what can I say about Sonic and Smash? Well, if you know anything about the Needle Mouse, it's that he's the fastest thing alive. Ergo, the fastest character in all of Smash Bros. Meaning he has high mobility, especially on the ground, but his attack and KO power is pretty weak. So not only is controlling all that speed difficult, but getting hits and finishing off opponents is especially tricky. To add insult to injury, he has two specials that are basically the same, and his palette swaps are pretty dull. So why would I rank him this high? It's not so much nostalgia, since I kinda fell off of Sonic for a few years in my teens, but I did spend quite a bit of my childhood playing as Sonic, and that meant plenty of time getting accustomed to his speed. Sure, getting kills is still difficult even today, and a weak final smash doesn't help, but stopping and attacking doesn't feel so difficult to me after all the time that I've spent with him. See kids, practice does make perfect. Also, if you want a crazy time, high-speed special smash with bunny hoods on walk-off stages with all Sonic, that never gets old. It does feel kind of weird to have Fox, Falco, and Wolf so separate from each other when they play so similarly. And same with characters like Mario, Dr. Mario, and Luigi. But they each have their own feel to them, you know? That even if they're similar, some of the differences feel so much greater. I don't really know for sure how to describe it, and I can't help but feel like I'm gonna be getting some very confused and crazed looks from people when I get this list out there, but I feel like I need to describe this as best as I can, especially when someone like Toon Link managed to quickly dethrone Sonic as my favorite Brawl fighter. All things considered, he's just young Link with a bit more vanilla Link in him, like as in no fire arrows, and with a cartoon coat of paint. But when I unlocked him in Brawl and managed to get through Classic Mode and All-Star Mode with him without losing a single life, which was something that I hadn't done yet in Brawl, I knew there was something special there. And am I crazy in saying he feels stronger than young Link, or even normal Link? Like, usually smaller and faster clones, or any fighter, are weaker than the taller versions, but Toon Link just feels like his sword swings pack more of a punch even before they brought young Link back. I'm not sure if my logic is legit or even makes any sense, but if there is one thing I can say with confidence, it's that Toon Link is a model example of how to make a semi-clone. Compare him to young Link, who, while formidable, is still a carbon copy of the big boy Link, and Toon Link feels that much more like a fighter all his own. The fact that he's the best version of Link from my #1 favorite Zelda game is just a nice bonus. So in hindsight, the fact that Bandai Namco was brought to help make Smash 3DS and Wii U, then eventually Ultimate, made Pac-Man getting into the roster much more of a certainty than I gave him credit for. But even I had my doubts. I feared they either would have just used the classic yellow circle look exclusively, or his creepy as hell modern design, which, no. I didn't have high hopes that they'd use this Pac-Man world design, but they did. Or, I guess, Pac-Land design, but I never played Pac-Land, I played Pac-Man World 2. Would like to play that game again, I remember it being fun. And that's just the beginning. I'm actually really surprised how much I wound up liking Pac-Man. Then again, I didn't really know what to expect from him when the news came out. He's a surprising powerhouse with a versatile set of wacky attacks, using his own enemies to smash attacks, making a path of pellets to dash through, even making a working fire hydrant that you can launch with a strong attack. And even as a nice touch, you could throw all the different kinds of bonus fruit as a projectile that all have varied effects, which is a pretty nice touch. Although I usually just go for the bell or the key. He takes a decent bit of practice to figure out, especially with the fire hydrant. The water pushes him too, and it takes a really strong hit to knock it off its perch. And I guess you can't just attack the water like in the showcase trailer in Ultimate to get rid of it. I don't know, it's weird. But he is so strong and so fun to use. If there was anything I didn't really like about Pac-Man, it would be his palette swaps. They are the worst palette swaps in the entire franchise. He gets like these sleeves and wings on his shoes that change color, but not his actual body. One of them is even just yellow, even though he's already yellow, and the red looks like it hardly changes anything. One of the colors just makes his gloves and shoes flat, and that's it. If you thought Sonic's palette swaps were bad, Pac-Man's even worse. Like, it hardly changes anything, it just looks so boring. Like, Bandai Namco were helping to make the game, why not get creative with it? Hell, why didn't they just make Miss Pac-Man a skin? That's so obvious! Oh, right, I'm in the top 10, it's supposed to be positive. Well, boring palette swaps aside, Pac-Man is super strong and super fun to use. Pac-Man wasn't the only surprising, yet not that surprising inclusion in Smash 3DS and Wii U. With how big Pokemon was, and still is, it was only natural that a rep from the newest generation would be added. But X and Y were still pretty new when Smash 3DS and Wii U was in development, so I was prepared for a Gen 5 Pokemon like Zoroark. But as someone who didn't beat a Pokemon game until Gen 6, it made me so goddamn excited to see the starter I beat the Kalos League with getting a kick-ass trailer after a big ol' Smash Direct. And considering Sakurai only had concept art and a brief description to go off of during development, Greninja feels pretty accurate to what the actual game gave. Except for maybe how he uses Mad Block and no use of his protein ability, but I didn't use either of those, so who cares. Like Sheath, Greninja is an archetypal ninja fighter, super fast and mobile with a great pool of options for moving and fighting from a distance. His fully charged Water Shuriken is a great range tool, and I abuse the hell out of his sick Shadow Sneak special. But what puts Greninja in my top 10 but not Sheath is the difference in power. Call me an idiot, assuming you haven't already, but I always felt like Greninja had the higher damage output. Or maybe I'm just coping because he's one of my favorite Pokemon, but I still like his attacks more. So kind of a weird but maybe still fun fact about me, though mostly weird. Greninja was for a time my second or third favorite Smash fighter, but in Ultimate, not only is he obviously not, but I feel like I kind of forget he's in the game most of the time. Like, I just go through this huge roster, and somehow I wind up finding myself back to Greninja and just being like, oh, right, he is in the game, isn't he? Which is weird, since he was such a favorite of mine, but also really unfortunate, since he was a favorite of mine. Like, out of all of these fighters that they put in, including some that I feel like could be considered generally forgettable, I forget about Greninja. Like, how? Why couldn't I forget Pichu was in the game? Why Greninja? Robin was a breath of fresh air among the Fire Emblem reps added to Smash Bros., and it made so much more sense to add them instead of Chrom, who would have been an obvious clone. So, was it really necessary to add him to Ultimate? Was it really worth adding to the Echo Fighters in the grand scheme of things? And could they really not find an alternative character to use for Robin's final smash? I still think that's kinda weird. Well, whatever. Chrom got his chance another day, so we're gonna talk about him. And, yeah, Chrom's actually really good. Marth and Lucina are solid combatants that feel a little too boring and feel a little too precise to pull off their attacks for my taste. Chrom really isn't all that different fundamentally, but he's got the raw power to really make it feel like a supposedly boring moveset doesn't matter. And without a tipper mechanic, you don't need to worry about spacing. Chrom's biggest weakness, however, is his air game. He can move and fight well enough in the air, dealing a decent enough amount of damage, but his only movement attack is a discount ether recovery that's not quite as flashy, or at least feels more like a ripoff, but just as risky as Ike's. But without the option of a quick draw attack for horizontal recovery, he's very limited on how to get back on the stage when he's launched. On the whole, his air game is actually worse than Little Mac's. Little Mac, of all people. That's really saying something. What? If you can keep yourself grounded and in control, then Chrom can dominate a fight. But there's also the fact that Chrom does indeed play similarly to other sword wielders that I've talked about, and one I haven't talked about yet. Okay, yeah, number 7 is Roy. I think that's obvious enough. And I think I've always enjoyed Roy to some degree. Back in the Melee days, I enjoyed his fiery sword more than Marth's, and his Japanese voice actor does some fantastic battle grunts. But I was a little too simple-minded to really grasp what all Smash fighters can do, as I've made painfully obvious by now. As time moved on to Smash 3DS and Wii U, and we got at least slightly more diverse Fire Emblem fighters, it started to feel like we really didn't need Roy. But they added him as DLC, and with a sweet new look and a tweaked semi-clone moveset, and oh my god, why would I ever think we didn't need Roy? Take all of the positive stuff I said about Chrom, copy-paste it onto this section, coat that sword in fire, and give him a reverse tipper to make getting up close and personal more beneficial, and a better recovery, and you got yourself one of the best fighters in all of Smash Bros., bar none. Well, as best as far as I'm concerned anyway, and it's my list, so again, deal with it. I've made it clear that I'm not a technical Smash player, and it's safe to assume I'm not great at playing the game. But Roy is one of the few fighters that I actually feel like I can really hold my own in a fight. Sure, there are more fighters that I like more. They pique my interest more, whether there are aspects of their gameplay that I think work a little bit better than Roy, maybe for the sake of range and damage dealing, or I just think that they're a little more fun in regards to design or wackiness or what have you. But I can't argue with results, and Roy is indeed my boy. My golden boy, specifically, because I actually really like his yellow palette swap. Remember back when I talked about being super picky about fighters that I thought should and shouldn't be playable in Smash Bros.? Feels like ages ago at this point. I held on to this standard for longer than I'm proud to admit, but in a weird way, you can argue that it made certain reveals all the more interesting and exciting. The biggest reason I was so against certain fighters was because I didn't think they'd work out as fighters, and then getting in was Sakurai and his team just proving me wrong. In Bowser Jr.'s case, it was more so that I didn't like fan ideas of how he'd play, relying so much on his one appearance in Super Mario Sunshine when he's made a bigger presence for himself throughout the series. When I heard that he used the Junior Clown Car as his means of combat with the Koopalings as his alternate colors, I was intrigued. Then I actually played as him myself, and whatever nonsense I'm spewing before was long forgotten. It's crazy how easy that is when you have so much fun. Props to the developers for fully understanding what made Bowser Jr. such a fun villain counter to his dad, being more technical and wacky with his fighting style. Admittedly, I am not nearly all that good to justify putting him this high, see my discussion on Incineroar, but Bowser Jr.'s arsenal of chaos isn't super difficult to handle and is just so much fun to use. There may be more effective chargeable projectiles or dashing specials, but how many of them are as fun to pull off? And hey, they still put in Shadow Mario and his paintbrush as a halfway decent final smash too. Plus, any excuse to play as my favorite Koopaling is gonna get some brownie points from me. On the topic of my less fun younger self, I can't help but wonder what I would have thought of Smash Ultimate's roster. There are definitely fighters I would have been stoked to see, but plenty I would question. I just know that after getting adjusted to the shock of fucking Piranha Plant, I would have been royally pissed off. But when that reveal dropped, I had grown and matured enough to handle it better. In fact, when the reality of it finally registered that what we were seeing was a new playable character, and believe me, that took a while to process, I was way too busy laughing my ass off to be angry. This fighter right here is the purest definition of Sakurai's stance of adding fighters that they think would be fun to make. A do it just cause we can character. And honestly, with how I've grown and changed as a Smash fan, I wouldn't have it any other way. Outside of the novelty of a random generic potted Piranha Plant being playable, it's actually a very versatile fighter. With a projectile, poison breath, and amazing recovery, a surprising range strike, and serious combo game. Maybe it's not the most technical fighter in the grand scheme of things, but I honestly do not care what other people think of Piranha Plant after all this time. The novelty may have died for others, but it absolutely has not died for me. This fighter is too funny, and the fact that they actually made this joke idea into a legitimate fighter is just so good. Someone may finally come around and make a platform fighter that's objectively better than Smash Brothers, but with something like this, I doubt it could ever truly happen in my lifetime. There is a part of me that's a bit peeved that we got a random potted Piranha Plant as a playable video game minion, but not Bandana Waddle Dee, who's an actual character. But maybe in a future Smash Brothers game, maybe? Like, at least an assist trophy. Come on, Sakurai. He's from your games. What are you doing? Alright, this is it. We're down to the wire, the cream of the crop, my absolute favorite fighters in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Besides random, of course. And if we're gonna ring in my all-time favorites, we're gonna need the right backing track. Cue the brass section! Oh yeah, baby. So, what can I say about King K. Rool in Smash Brothers that hasn't already been said? He is easily the wildest and wackiest heavyweight fighter I have ever seen in a fighting game, touting a wide variety of moves, including projectiles, a counter, and a surprisingly great recovery for a character like this. And even as a heavyweight, he's big. And I mean big, large, thick. He can tank hits and dish out damage like it's nobody's business, and yet he can still move and hit from a distance with the best of them. The Croc is insane, and not just cause he's got a giant death laser trained on DK Island. Sure, most people have figured out the strats to deal with K. Rool at this point, making him less intimidating in the eyes of many. But I don't care if he's not as scary as he was before, I still absolutely love this unit. It makes me so happy to see a long-forgotten character given such great Smash treatment, shown that even after so many years left in the dust like Banjo and Kazooie, he still gets a chance to shine for modern audiences. So, when are they gonna bring him and the Kremlings back for Donkey Kong Country? I'm still waiting. So hey, does anyone else remember early 2021 when lots of people were being fucking babies about Pyra and Mythra getting into Smash? I was on Twitter when this happened. It didn't feel as bad as Byleth, but it wasn't great. And also different from Byleth is how much I love playing as these ladies. Their crazy strong sword attacks and surprising ranged and movement options make for some of the best fighters in Smash Bros., even making a case for a better fighter I can play as than Roy. But what really makes Pyra and Mythra so great in Smash Bros. Is how they take an old mechanic and make it actually good. The character switching mechanic has been a thing since Melee with Zelda and Sheik, and then later with Samus and Zero Suit Samus, and even the Pokemon trainer with 3 and 1 characters, and it used to let players switch between distinctly different playstyles in battle. The problem was that the playstyles were too different, to the point where you could just use one playstyle and dominate with that, and never even touch the other one. Makes you wonder what the point of the switching mechanic even is. At least with the Pokemon trainer, you're forced to switch with each KO. Pyra and Mythra change things up by having the same attacks and mechanics. As Sakurai said, almost like they're basically Echo Fighters. What separates them from each other are their stats and specials. Pyra specializes in big, fiery attacks that are designed to send foes flying and score KOs, while Mythra uses fast, light attacks to zip around the stage and build up damage. Other than the specials and Mythra's foresight dodging ability, all of their attacks are the same in regards to style. Sure, you could still use one over the other and be fine, but it feels so much harder to do so than with the other characters like this we've seen. It really does feel like you should switch between the two as the situation calls for it in order to win with them, and that is how a 2-in-1 character should be. After almost 20 years, they finally figured it out. Though, if you had to ask which I would pick over the other, I'd probably say Pyra, but that's mostly because of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, admittedly. There are a startling number of character ideas for Super Smash Bros. I used to hate. And thinking about it, there are a startling number of characters already in Smash that I would have been against had I had the same mindset back then. Bowser Jr. may have been the first major example of being wrong in such a positive way, but that was only the beginning. For there was no plausible fighter idea I was anywhere near as against than Ridley. Not so much for the whole too big for Smash argument, that was kind of old to begin with, but more so that he was a boss character first and foremost, and that was a more appropriate role than playable character. Sakurai had apparently tried to figure him out in Smash 3DS and Wii U, and hearing that it failed brought me validation. It didn't last long though, because not long after, Smash Ultimate was announced, Ridley was added, and I was proven wrong. And I have never been so happy to be wrong about anything in my whole life. It wasn't enough that they managed to figure out how to make Ridley a playable fighter in Smash Bros., but they also had to make him so damn fun too. Massive size, but great air mobility, vicious attacks, solid projectile, a stab move with a super strong sweet spot, and his trademark drag your ass across a hard surface until your face peels off technique. Not to mention fun additions, like Samus' starship crashing in the background after his final smash, and easily the best taunt in the entire Smash Bros. Franchise. Ridley is yet another fighter that I am not too sure I am all that good with, but I've played with him enough that I think I can chalk him up to one of my best fighters. Maybe not necessarily above Roy, Pyra, and Mythra though, but what puts him this high is that I have so much fun with him, and I can't really think of too many negatives about him. And for someone I was so adamant against joining Smash Bros., that really says something, especially about Sakurai and his team. Never let anyone tell you being wrong is always a bad thing. And here we have it. Number 1. My favorite fighter in Super Smash Bros. Besides just random. You should be able to do process of elimination to figure out who it is, though it might be a bit hard. This is a pretty big list after all. And admittedly, I have said in the past who some of my favorites are, so you might know already. I've been ironing out this list since at least Brawl, and it's been evolving and changing both as the series has changed and as my views and standards have changed. The biggest change has been me trying to focus more on the actual gameplay rather than personal merits for fighters, and I'd say I've done a pretty good job of that overall. But in the end, it's admittedly not perfect. There may be other fighters worthy of my number 1 spot based on all of the things that I've had to say, and I wouldn't blame you for arguing it should be different based on my own opinions in this video series. But when the final DLC character added to the latest and best installment of my number 1 all-time favorite video game franchise just so happens to be the protagonist of my second all-time favorite video game franchise, then I'm sorry, but everyone else is just competing for second place at this point. Sora in Super Smash Bros. Just Sora in Super Smash Bros. It's already been a few years and I still can't believe it actually happened. Just when I thought that dreams couldn't come true. Just like in a Disney movie, how appropriate. Even after watching the trailer nearly a dozen times, I still get a big dumb grin on my face. Truly a testament to the impact Smash Bros. Has and what Sakurai is capable of if they were actually able to pull this off. And his gameplay reflects this as well. Like in Kingdom Hearts, Sora is a floaty, close-quarters fiend with plenty of combo options, range tools, and more than enough recovery ability. Like, it's one thing to just give him that super floaty second jump, but to let him combo off of his Sonic Blade immediately after his up special, it's excessive. Like, there is no reason anyone should fall off the stage as Sora unless you were just straight up knocked off. Okay, taking the heart-colored lenses off, I acknowledge that Sora is not perfect by any means. I'm not crazy about the fact that his magic automatically changes each time you use a spell. His counter is my least favorite out of all of the counters. It just doesn't feel super effective. And similar to Bayonetta, I have a hard time translating his action RPG playstyle into a Smash Bros. Setting, and I feel like I kinda flail around a little bit too much, which is especially wild and disappointing to think, considering how much I actually play Kingdom Hearts as opposed to Bayonetta. Honestly, the first place spot is closer to a tie with Ridley than I'm showing it through this list, but come on, it's Sora in Smash. He has to be number 1 by default. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules here. While I'm not committed enough to make him my one true main, as much as I love Kingdom Hearts, I love random in Smash Bros. Far too much. I am at least willing to put in effort to figure him out and make him one of my best picks. It's a slow process. There are other characters I think I'm objectively better with as I'm making this video, but it's worth it to get good with the rep from one of my favorite games. Now they just need to add Roxas in the next Smash Bros. Game. Then I'll never ask for anything ever again. So yeah, this was my personal ranking of every single fighter in the Super Smash Bros. Series, or even just more specifically Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, because everyone is here. Yeah, I've never really done a project like this before, especially because video editing is still new to me, but I actually had a lot of fun doing this. I love Smash Brothers so much, I could talk about it for ages. But yeah, I wouldn't mind making more videos like this, honestly. And not just for Smash Brothers too, with other stuff, like with Kingdom Hearts, with Zelda, Pokemon, anything. I have a lot of game interests. So let me know what you think, if you would like to see more videos like this. I mean, I'll probably make more regardless, because that's just how I do content creation. But yeah, if you like it too, then even better. As I've said, I am currently live streaming on YouTube every weekend morning, so you can catch that, and of course you can always catch the VODs. I will always make sure those are available. There's other random miscellaneous videos I'll post on here on occasion like this. My links are available all over if you need them, but I'm also pretty active on Twitter and transitioning into Blue Sky. There's also my webcomics, my original series, That Shield Kid. I'm currently working on Chapter 5. It's a bit of a slow process, but they're all available on Webtoons if you want to read those, or just check out my other socials if you want to see any other artwork I post or any other ramblings I might have. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching.